Hi there. In this series where I show you videos of myself carrying out searches, I thought I'd do one on how you can sometimes use naming patterns to work out which family your ancestor might belong to. And when I talk about naming patterns, I mean the way parents tend to name their children in the past and today too, to some extent. But naming patterns tended to be stronger in the past, so often they can be used to identify one family from another. So, generally speaking, in England, a first son could be named after the father or sometimes the grandfather, and the second son after either one or both. And other children might be named after uncles, aunts, and of course the females might be named after the mother, grandmother, etc. In Wales, there's even more of a rigid pattern. Generally, it's the first son named after the father and then the second son after the grandfather. But before the surnames became fixed, the surnames in Wales were based on the father's first name. So you would have, for example, the son of Hugh Evans could be something like David ap Hugh. So the ap would be son of Hugh. So in Wales, naming patterns can really help with genealogy, particularly as there's a very strong set of common surnames in Wales, which makes things difficult. But the strong naming pattern can really help. Now, it's not an exact science. It's not always the case that a father would name his children after his own father, especially perhaps if maybe he did not get on with his father or either of his parents, then they're less likely to name a child after them. We can't know that, of course. But generally speaking, when we're looking at different sets of families and we can see a strong naming pattern connecting one family with the previous generation, it can give you a good indication of where your ancestor belongs. Now, the video I'm going to show you is again from my own family tree. And I was having a look at one of my bot ancestors, and I'd never been particularly happy with the closest baptism I could find for him. Let's have a look. So I've never been particularly happy about my baptism details for my ancestor Samuel Bott. Samuel was the father of Elizabeth here, and she had illegitimate children with John Walker. Well, I'm very lucky to have the name, because often with illegitimate births we don't have the father's name, but we do in this case. It was named in the baptisms. And John Walker Bott is my direct ancestor. And I've always wanted to try and trace the Elizabeth line, the Bott line back. And it's she came from Staffordshire, which is very much where the Bott name comes from. And her father was Samuel Bott, married to Jane Barlow. He died in 1833 in Alton, which is a lovely little village. I visited it twice, very close to Alton Towers. We know that he was in his 80s when he died, and we have an approximate birth date of 1749. Now, of course, he died well before the census, so we don't have the luxury of having a birthplace. So I have tried to find his baptism around 1749. So let's just have a look at the sort of sequence of searches. So if we go to here, I've put in a search Samuel Bott 1749. I haven't clicked any exact boxes. I've just put in Alton, Staffordshire, 1749, and carried out a search, and this was what came up. Now, we do have a baptism in 1749 in a place called Stone. Now, if we look on the map, If we look first at Alton, this is Alton here. And if we just pull out a bit, you can see it's a few miles east of Stoke-on-Trent. The 1749 baptism here is at Stone, and Stone, if we go Stone, Staffordshire, we can see it is not that far away, just a little south of Stoke. Looks quite promising. What I don't like is the names of the parents, Ralph and Rebecca. Not that I don't like the names, I love the names. But if we look at Samuel's children, we've got Thomason, which is a female, interesting female name. We've got George, Joseph, Sarah, Hannah, Thomas, Elizabeth, and Helen. He does not name any of his children Ralph and or Rebecca. Now, I love naming patterns. I find them very useful. They're not, though, an exact science. Just because somebody doesn't name a child after a father doesn't necessarily mean you've got the wrong baptism, but it worries me, especially at these dates, because parish registers can be dodgy. Baptisms can be illegible, the parish registers could be damaged. So I'm always very, very cautious, especially when I don't see those names reflected. Now, the second one down is 1748. That's close enough for the margin of error. And we've got the names Samuel and Elizabeth. That's much more promising. But when we look at the map, and this is Colwich in Staffordshire, if we go to the map and look at Colwich, we find this is all the way down southeast of Stafford, and Alton is way up here. It's possible, of course. People did move around. They tended to move around within a certain area, though. So again, I am not so sure. And it's very interesting here, because I'm looking at the whole range of parish registers. We've got some burials down here. This burial here, the age gives a birth date of 1748, and this is at Seaford. Seaford is very close to Colwich. So that 1827 burial at Seaford looks very much like that Colwich Samuel. So I do not think that is my ancestor either. If we go a bit further down, that is my ancestor's burial date. So it's the birth date of approximately 1750. It's around 1749 at Alton, age 83. I have a photograph of his gravestone, which I've visited a couple of times, which also gives the age. I've looked at the marriages in the 18th century don't really give you much information. As you can see, Samuel Bott of this parish, Jane Barlow of this parish. And apart from the dates, that's about it really. And the witnesses, Joseph Cope, Edward Botham, they don't mean anything. We can see Edward Botham is probably a clerk because he's on all the other marriages. So I got a bit stuck with this one. However, one of the things I sometimes do when I've got some possible baptisms but I'm not particularly happy with them, I will have a look to see if there are any other people of that surname being baptised within the parish that he was living in. Now, I find the best website for doing this kind of search is Find My Past. And I've clicked on parish baptisms. So we're going to just put in the last name. Some Bott can have variations. Sometimes it's transcribed as but or bat. So I'm going to click that. Year of birth. I'm going to put in, let's say 1749, and put a range of 20 years either way. This is why Find My Past is really useful, because you can do a much bigger range than you can on Ancestry. And also, when we put in the place, Alton, Staffordshire, we can do an exact search in Alton. I've put 20 years either way, 1749, because people had lots of children then, and if he was the firstborn or the lastborn, it could have been, the couple could have been having children for 20 years. And look, we've got a lot of results. Some of these will be doubled up, but let's have a look. So now look, we've got Anne Elizabeth, we've got George, we've got Hannah, we've got a James, we've got a Joseph, a Joyce, and Martha, and Mary, Thomas, William. Now that we're going on to wild variations there. So, but these names look a little bit familiar, don't they? Let's just go back to the first page. Anne, Elizabeth, George, and Hannah. Let's just look at the names of Samuel's children. We've got George there, we've got Joseph, we've got a Hannah, we've got a Thomas and Elizabeth. They look quite interesting. Let's just see what the parents' names are. Let's just see. Let's just view the transcript. So we've got a William and Anne. And we've got, that's all the same, Elizabeth. Let's see who's the father. George. We've got a Joseph and Elizabeth. We've got possibly another George, son of George and Mary. And let's just see, Hannah. Oh, we've got an illegitimate birth there for Martha. There's Joseph. Joseph and Hannah. Now, there seem to be several couples in Alton having children, and they have similar names to Samuel's children. My way of thinking is that Samuel is the son of one of these people. What I'm going to do is just have a look at the original registers. Let's just have a look at Joseph's. Sometimes this can give you an idea of the state of the registers to see if they looked at all damaged. If we go to, and of course, you can then have a browse of the registers when you've got the original ones online, just to see if you can find your ancestor and maybe see whether he'd been mistranscribed or whether there was something missing. I mean, they look in quite good state, these parish registers, so they don't look particularly damaged or illegible. So one thing we could do here, and I'm not going to do that right now, is actually go through the originals, browse through the originals and just check to see if Samuel was entered, but somehow his name doesn't look right, you know, it's been mistranscribed or something. But I'd be willing to bet that Samuel was born in Alton to one of these couples. I think the most likely may be Joseph and Hannah, as he names two of his children Joseph and Hannah. But that is another difficulty we have there, because there are several booked couples in Alton having children at this time. It's interesting. There's a Joseph there baptised in 1749, son of Joseph and Ellen. It's interesting because that's another, Ellen and Helen is often the same name, and that makes me wonder because Samuel has a daughter called Helen, and this Joseph died a year later after his baptism. So that's given me pause for thought about Samuel's birth origins. Anyway, I'm not going to spend too much time on this, but what we could do is go through all these baptisms, make a note of them, or make a note of all the different couples and the times they're having children, the names of all these different children, maybe make little diagrams, and just see where Samuel might slot in. Sometimes it's quite useful when you look at these lists of children. Very often children come at a sort of gap of every 2 years, or maybe 18 months to 2 years or 3 years, and sometimes you can see where a missing baptism can slot in. A little bit speculative, yes, but I think we're getting closer here. I would be willing to bet that Samuel's father could quite possibly be Joseph, or maybe George. He names his first son George, his second son Joseph. See, these are very telling. Naming patterns are very useful when searching for 18th century baptisms and beyond. Now, I found that really interesting because although the only baptisms I could find for my ancestor Samuel were outside of Alton, several miles away, that there was certainly a family of Bots having children around the time that he was born in Alton. Now, if I hadn't found any Bots having children around that time, I would then have thought, well, obviously he must have been born elsewhere. But there was definitely a family in Alton having children who mirrored the names in his own family. So I am now fairly sure that he was actually born in Alton, and somehow his baptism has been missed. Sometimes people just forgot to baptize a child. It could be that his baptism is illegible in the registers and so hasn't been transcribed. This is one of those cases where going through the original registers might be useful just to check. And of course, the other possibility is that one of those baptisms is him, but he became known by a different name. We just don't know. So further research needs to be done on that family to find out, because there seem to be several Bot couples in Alton having children. So I'm still not sure which couple is the right one. I have a pretty good idea which one is most likely. I have noticed that there are a few Bot wills in Alton around that time. So my next step would probably be to have a look at some of the wills and see if I can find Samuel mentioned in any of those, which would establish a family relationship. But anyway, I hope that's been of some use. As I say, it's not an exact science. It doesn't always absolutely clinch things, but it can give you a definite indication of which baptism might be more likely as opposed to another one. Anyway, I hope to do more of these videos in future, and I hope that's helped. So for more videos like that, please make sure that you're subscribed, and I will see you again soon. Bye for now.